Lightroom, because those scripts only support Photoshop, you would write down all these numbers and you would type them in Lightroom. You would also have to make sure that you were using the same base profile to make the correction in Lightroom that you were when you made the profile or the calibration inside of Photoshop. A few years ago this wasn't an issue, but now they have Camera Faithful and Camera Standard and Adobe Standard, all for one camera. You even have multiple versions. So you need to pick one you like, calibrate it, and then pick the same one in Lightroom, put these numbers in, and save that.
What software actually creates that profile with the color checker? Or, you know,
Which tool you're talking about?
On that last one that you have, what software actually creates that profile?
This was the Color Checker Passport software.
Okay, that's a passport software.
Yeah, or the Adobe DNG editor would also create that.
Okay, and like the dual illuminant, how does it get used in practice?
You just select that, and when you set your white balance,
And they could be quite different.
yes. So when you set your white balance here, it knows to go to the daylight one.
Right.
When you set your one here, it knows to use the other version, the indoor one. And when you go halfway in between, it blends them.
So basically what you're doing is you're just replacing the standard color temperature with the dual illuminant that you created yourself.
No, the color temperature still on. It's how once you've set the white point, it's an adjustment for the colors. So grays will not be affected, but as it gets into the colored areas, it's making adjustments to how it perceives blue, or green, or purple, or whatever, as being, you know, the blue's too purple, or the blue's too cyan of a blue. And if that's slightly different under one light versus another, it knows how to make up for those differences because you have two references. Okay, so real key things. I need to keep moving here. Once you have something set up the way you like, you can select a bunch of them and synchronize. You probably have already seen a lot of this. Key things are, if you're doing your gray card, you go up to this little eyedropper that has some gray in it, and you click on it. It now knows how to what gray is, and that's how it compensates. If you have a whole bunch of pictures that all were shot under that same light, again, you select them and you hit synchronize. You tell it, I just want to do white balance. Or yeah, they were all dark. I made it brighter. I want to make them all brighter as well. If you did the calibration script, you would select this calibration section down here. Or if you change the profile that you created with the Color Checker Passport software. If you're exporting for the web, you would change this little right there, what says Adobe RGB and the size of the file, to a different profile. ProPhoto, if you're going to be working in 16-bit and want a much more saturated look. Or not look, but capability. Here's the presets for your white point if you don't use them. These can be useful a lot of times because if you're taking a picture of a sunset, you can't just put a gray card in. There's no light on you. And you might not want it to compensate for the light of the sunset. You might want to tell it it's daylight and let that orange look come through. Once you have made adjustments that you like, you can also save them, and you right-click. I mean, no, sorry. You click right at the end of this toolbar here. This window comes up. You hit Save Settings, and you select what you want to save. So if you don't want to mess with all these other things, you just want to load that specific profile or the calibration script that you've created, you just click that and hit Save. So then when you apply that setting, it won't change your white balance. It won't change your exposure, but it will load all those little adjustments that the script made. Inside of Lightroom, same thing. You right-click on the picture instead. You click Develop Settings. You hit Copy. You select all the ones that you want to have the same settings, and you hit Paste. This is kind of a key thing because a lot of people don't go here, but under Edit, Bridge Color Settings, no, Creative Suite Color Settings, they change the name every version. You want to select a working space here that uses the same output profile you were using here. Because this sometimes fixes a bug that I'm finding in Photoshop CS4 on some certain machines. Sometimes it doesn't fix it. Some people aren't experiencing it. But if you make sure that this is set the same as this is set here, it's at least one less variable. All right, so Lightroom. White balance, again, same idea. We've got, and what I've done here to simplify things is I've eliminated everything that's like sharpness and all that kind of stuff. You can go, and we're just talking about color here. White balance, brightness, contrast, exposure. Here's your little your profile loaded in, and if you want to make fine-tuning adjustments. Right here, if you hit plus in that section right there, presets, it's like synchronize, except for you are now saving a preset so you can just affect white balance and calibration, or whatever you want. But that's big part of what I'm talking about here is I don't want to make this image darker or brighter. I just want to load these specific settings that I had set here. And like I said, on this particular setting, I told it was daylight. Well, it's not daylight. And I also told it was indoor to compensate for indoor. What it did was it pushed the blue here to unrealistic. There's some things you can do with that. But again, here's your little eyedropper. It's in a different place now, but same idea. You click on that. You click on your gray card. Or you just randomly change this until you like the look. But you keep in mind, you're telling it how to compensate for those different curves of light that we were talking about at the very beginning. If you right-click on the picture, again, you can go to Develop Settings, copy the settings, tell it what you're going to copy, just white balance. Right-click on multiple pictures and hit Develop Settings and hit Paste. I happen to like this a little bit better than Synchronize, because a lot of times, you might have changed multiple pictures. Which one's it going to use as the one that's in charge? So when you fix one picture, you copy those settings, you select a bunch of pictures that you notice that you're shooting a wedding, and these are all indoors, and these other ones are outdoors. You fix the first indoor one, or the gray balance card that you shot in the indoor environment, or the color checker passport. You get everything all set up, copy it, you paste it on the rest. And then you can go and say, oh, yes, but that one's too dark, that one's too bright, and make small adjustments from there. You've also got synchronized settings. Same idea. When you go to export, key thing, just like on Adobe Camera Raw at the Adobe Camera Raw at the bottom, when you export the file, if you're going to be saving this to be used in Adobe RGB and Photoshop, you can select that there. So the nice thing about this is, export them a whole bunch in ProPhoto, you come back, you change the Photoshop document to a JPEG, you downsample, you put in sRGB here, and boom, you're ready to put those on Facebook or whatever. But that's the key thing that's handling color under output. OK, so I'm going to really quickly go over Capture One Pro. Same idea. You've got exposure, brightness, but right here you can load an actual real profile. Different interface, different feel. It does some different things. Like I said, every piece of software is a little bit different. This does some things that some other ones don't, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not in any way promoting this particular product, but it does do some things that you can't do in Adobe Camera Raw.
Capture One from, is that
it's from Phase One. It's company Phase One's product. They have their own backs that they've produced, and they made software, and they made a version that's specific to reading RAW files that does a lot of the same things. This will run your camera as well as in a tethered mode.
Okay. Is this, can you use this software with a Canon or a...
Yeah. They have a whole list of cameras it supports. Go to look at their website if you're interested. I'm just covering the color options this particular product has. Like I said, I'm not in any way endorsing it. It does things you can't do somewhere else, though. If you're going to actually build a profile, once you've shot that target, you need to decide what kind of a curve. And this is really unique to this piece of software. This is set to linear response. So my properly exposed picture, or maybe even overexposed, I don't know, now is really dark. Well, actually, our cameras see really dark. It just gets fixed later. So this doesn't correct for it. You set this to not apply a correction, this specific profile, and it embeds that non-correction profile when you're creating the profile. So you shot your target, and basically we're disabling their color management in this window. The next window, we've loaded that profile in. We generated it, went through that whole process we went through earlier. We now load the profile. We tell it to emulate film, but I want a little more shadow detail. It's got this